It is now my pleasure to introduce Michael Solomonov, the James Beard award-winning chef and co-owner of the internationally famous Philadelphia restaurant, Zahav. Zahav, which opened its doors in 2008, means gold in Hebrew, and it has certainly been a culinary treasure to Philadelphia. He began his career working in a bakery in Israel, and with Zahav, he has brought the authentic flavors of Israel's cultural heritage to Philadelphia. Delighting diners with pillowy laffa bread, delectable hummus dip, and sizzling meat skewers. In 2011, he won the James Beard Award for Best Chef in the Mid-Atlantic region. He is also the owner of several other popular Philadelphia eateries, including Percy Street Barbecue, Federal Donuts, Dizengoff, and Abe Fisher. Chef Solomonov tells the story of this Israeli melting pot fusion in his new book, Zahav, A World of Israeli Cooking. In it, he teaches readers how to make his food their own. Chef Mark Vetri says, after years of asking him for recipes, I am relieved to finally have his book to answer all of my questions. We are so pleased to have him here with us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Michael Solomonov to the Free Library of Philadelphia.
It's really the story of your family, your parents, your grandparents, and I don't say this lightly, it's really well written. It's got beautiful imagery of you baking barikas with your grandma and chasing rats with a pizza cutter at your first job in a bakery, eating barbecue with your brother with towels wrapped around your waist after a day at the beach. So start us off telling us sort of the back and forth from Israel. You were born there.
Yeah, so I was born in a little town called Gnei Yehuda, which is kind of by the airport, and my mom is American, and she grew up in Ohio, East Liverpool, Ohio, which is very different than Israel. Her father, my grandfather, Alex Fisher, was a really big like Israel Bonds guy, and he sort of got everybody pretty fired up about Israel, I think, growing up. And I think my mom decided that if she moved to Israel, that she could date whoever she wanted because everybody was Jewish. So she moved in the 60s and then again in the 70s, and she met my dad. My dad is Bulgarian, born in Bulgaria, moved during independence when he was like 2 years old to Israel and met my mom. They had me. He wanted to come to America and kill it and to the land of opportunity. So he moved here. He convinced my mom to actually leave Israel. She actually didn't want to leave. And they moved to the States. We had a very sort of normal life in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then when I was about, come on, do it. Let's go.
Some Pittsburghers.
Just get that out of the way, all right? So we had a very normal life in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She was an English teacher in a Solomon Schechter day school. And my dad was a jeweler for a bit and then owned like a few Subway sandwich shops. I was a sandwich artist. That was my first job. And he fired me from it too. So I sucked. But so we moved back to Israel when I was 15, and I went to an American boarding school for a year with the idea that I would move back to the States, finish high school, and then go to college. And my younger brother, David, who was born in the States, sort of integrated into Israeli society. He was a couple years younger than me, and he went to the military, like what everyone else does.
So it seemed like when you were in the U.S., you wished you were in Israel, and when you were in Israel, you wished you were in the U.S. You had this back and forth pull, it seemed like, from reading the book.
Yeah, it didn't really happen until I moved to Israel. Short of my dad having like a weird accent, or whenever there'd be like, news, while we were like sitting around eating dinner and watching like MASH on TV or whatever, every now and then they'd flip to the news and there'd be some sort of conflict, and then we'd get quiet, and that was sort of an important thing. Or if my dad would like flip out, he would scream in Hebrew, which is how I learned Hebrew, actually. And like we'd eat things like schnitzel, or when my grandmother would come to visit, we'd make, she'd make borekos, and I love that. But there wasn't much about Israel that I was really into. It seemed like a very far away place, which, it is. It's thousands of miles away from Pittsburgh, but it also wasn't that close into what we were doing sort of personally. We had like a very sort of normal American Jewish life. And then we moved back, and I was 15 years old. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to move. I was sort of forced to. And when I came back, though, it was like really difficult. Things were different. The values that I had as a 15-year-old, a sophomore in, American public school, everything was off. And I came back, and Rabin was assassinated shortly after, and everything seemed a lot closer to me. But then I tried college, failed, came back to Israel, and got a job cooking in a bakery. I wasn't cooking, I was like washing sheet trays. And I did that. It wasn't because I was into cooking, it was because I had no other skills, So I just sort of walked up and down the street and asked for, I asked this one bakery that was very close to my mom's apartment if they were hiring. And they said, sure. And they got a fancy American immigrant that they could exploit. and I loved it. That's how it started.
It seemed like that job in the bakery sort of really helped you find your place in the world. That was a really poignant part of the book.
Well, shockingly, it did. I certainly didn't think that the day that I started there, and I didn't think that the first, shift. Like on Shabbat, you'd go on Thursday night at, midnight, and you'd work till Friday sundown. And I certainly wasn't, scrubbing sheet trays for like 10 hours saying, I'm going to do great at this. I think we should open an Israeli restaurant in Philadelphia. No, I was enjoying working. I was enjoying, I think, being sort of humbled and doing something totally different. And there's so many different sort of slices of society that you interact with, and you work at a bakery in the Middle East. It's very, very different. We'd go in there and I'd work with immigrants, and nobody cared that I was American or had never scrubbed a sheet tray or anything like that. And you make challah on Thursday nights, and every single person buys. They're not scared of bread like they are here, so everybody. Or pastries, actually, it's like 3 times a day. You got to have a pastry. So the bakery and the pastry shop was sort of, you'd see everybody, and. It's a ritual, right? On Friday afternoon before you get home, you buy a challah for Shabbat. So it was really fascinating.
So was that sort of when you started to see that this could be a career path? And I'm a little bit confused about the timeline. After that, you went to cooking school?
Right. So I got a job then working as a short order cook in a cafe up the street. And I don't know if at that point I wanted to be a chef. I think everybody in my family was just psyched that I wasn't in jail.
You were doing something.
Right, exactly. There was something legitimate, and so I got a job as a cook, and that's when I fell in love with cooking, and I think that's when I fell in love with eating too. Actually, I was an incredibly picky eater up until then. So that was amazing. I think when you find something that you love to do that is maybe not that respectable, certainly. Chefs weren't that cool then, you have to understand. And it was still tons of work. And in the summer that I worked there, the ventilation system in the kitchen had broken, and it was in the middle of a chamsim, which are when hot winds come from the desert. So it's 105 degrees, blowing hot winds, and again, people yelling, and really, I went in, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and on Thursdays we would leave at 8 o'clock in the morning. Because I guess Israelis just like to hang out and eat. I mean, it was not even a lot of drinking. It was crazy. So you'd be there when people were on their way to work, and you're like, oh, cool, I just worked like 100 hours. And but when you can leave that shift and say, I want to go do that again, that's something special. So I really, really love that. And then I knew I wanted to go to culinary school. I had sort of wasted all of my the money that I had for college on the year and a half before that. And so I went to a little culinary school in West Palm Beach, Florida. Again, another, yeah, right, like a suburb of Israel, West Palm Beach. I landed and everybody was like dancing in the airport. It was.
And you must have been pretty good because you eventually made your way to striped bass and then Vetri.
I ended up working for a restaurant group down there that had all these sort of like New York expat chefs, and even the culinary school that I was at. I mean, there were a few kids that were very interested, and all the chefs had great experience, and I was excited about doing something legitimate. So it was like, you know, I really wanted to work hard, and I really enjoyed it, and I think they recognized that, my chef instructors and the chefs that I worked for, and they really pushed me incredibly hard. You know, which is great. It was not easy. I mean, it's not, being a line cook is really not easy. Being a line cook and having to pay rent is not easy. In South Florida, it was like, they called, my nickname is Rabbi. Get it? Because I'm Jewish. At that time, there weren't that many Jewish line cooks, and it was like really, there were plenty of Jewish customers in South Florida, but not a lot of Jewish line cooks, and it was really tremendously difficult work, and the people that I worked with pushed me. One of our corporate chefs was Charlie Trotter's pastry chef, and she knew that I wanted to go work for him, and she would just like hold that over my head all the time. Like, can I step off the line to go to the bathroom? Well, at Charlie Trotter's, they don't go to the bathroom. So I didn't go to the bathroom for 2 years, and then I wanted to move. I wanted to move to New York actually, and because I thought that was like I had to go work at like Le Cirque or something like that. And the girl that I was living with at the time has a brother in Yardley, so we stopped in Philly. We actually ate. It's so funny. We ran into Susanna Food tonight, and the first meal that we had, the meal that changed it, that we were like, okay, well, let's do Philly, was a dinner at Susanna Fu. We had scallion dumplings, and we had a duck with like a hoisin situation. And the service was really amazing, and it was, you know, Walnut Street at that time was very, very different than it is now. So we ended up moving to Philadelphia, and I worked at a restaurant called Avenue B, which was covered in dust all the time by the construction from the Kimmel Center. And then I worked at Striped Bass under Terrence Fury, and then I got a job at Vetri.
So you must have been pretty good. Those places, you don't walk in
I
the door.
got fired and rehired from Striped Bass, and I'm pretty sure Mark wanted to like choke me out almost every night that I worked there. I don't know if I was that good, but I was good enough.
So you end up working for Steve Cook as his chef at Marigold Kitchen.
Right.
And all of a sudden, these Israeli dishes start appearing. Can you talk about how that happened, how that began to creep into your cooking?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I guess there were a few things happening. When I got the job at Vetri after the first year that I was there, my younger brother was killed in action in the IDF. And so I came back from Israel still very excited to cook at Vetri, but it wasn't, you know, the next year I guess I subconsciously decided that I wasn't that into it. I mean, the food was amazing, and I love Italian food, but it wasn't where my heart was. And I don't know what, you know, hindsight is crazy, right? I don't know. We talk about this all the time, and certainly with the book. It wasn't something that I like set out to do. Steve hired me, said you can do whatever you want, and we created menu items, and I created a menu, and we started cooking, and Israeli food sort of ended up on the menu. And it wasn't like Zahav. I mean, it wasn't like the food that we serve at Zahav. It was sort of like sneaky. It was like New American with, we did blue nose bass wrapped in grape leaves with like a chickpea puree, otherwise known as hummus, right? But and I think at some point, I think Steve has got experience, he spent time in Israel before and grew up eating food that was Jewish and sometimes bordering on Israeli. And we, I think just after going back to Israel and wondering why people weren't doing that, like, well, we should do that. We should just open an Israeli restaurant. So in 2008, May 5th, 2008, we opened.
And talk a little bit about how you sort of felt that this was like a destiny and also like a duty for you to do this. In part, maybe to honor your brother?
Yeah, again, it's like it took maybe a few years to understand that of being open. I mean, what we wanted to do was open a cool restaurant. Nobody else was doing Israeli food, and if they were, it was like Johnny, like business guy, that took a few recipes from Israel, opened a falafel shop or shawarma shop, and that was it. And that's what people thought of Israeli food, that it's like only those 3 items. You can only have falafel, only shawarma, only hummus, which is, awesome. I mean, those make great restaurants. Probably make a lot more money than Zahav makes if we did that. But so for us, it was something different. We wanted to explore new cuisine. And when you go over there and you eat, and you're eating, you like start a meal with like 10 different salads and bread that's fresh baked out of a wood-burning oven with all these different dips, and you've got the Moroccan, the Yemeni, the Ethiopian, the Georgian, the Balkan, the Greek, the Turkish, the this and that. I mean, why wouldn't you want to open a restaurant like that? I ask you. And why wouldn't you want to go eat that food? I mean, it's relatively healthy. It is very vegetable heavy. You have got 25 different cuisines that you can pull from. I mean, it's incredibly stimulating. So we wanted to open an Israeli restaurant. I wasn't thinking like, I need to like do this for my brother, but I mean, it definitely was. The first trip that we took over to Israel as a group was before we opened. We took our managers, our sous chefs and our managers over to Israel. We stayed in youth hostels, literally like slept on bunk beds. And we went around the country to eat because nobody knew what it was. And at the end of that trip, it was March 6th, the last day, and it happened to be my brother's birthday. Wow. And we took a little detour, and we stopped by the military cemetery in Kfar Saba where he was buried, and I don't know. I mean, I thought it was important, I guess, for people to see. We had traveled through the country for 10 days, and, the consequence of having a country like that is, I don't know, it was all relevant at the time, I guess. So, there's something very spiritual about cooking this food and the way that it relates to my ancestry and I guess to my brother as well. And that to be able to do something that you think is great, that is fun, that gets you fired up every single day, and then also has deeper meaning has been incredible, like writing the book as well.
Well, it comes through. It definitely comes through in the book.
Thank you. I actually paid her to say that.
So now Zahav is a runaway success, all kinds of critical acclaim. You got the James Beard Award, but it was a huge challenge and it was a rough go the first year.
Yeah.
I may be off on my timing, but wasn't that also the year that you confronted your addiction?
Yeah, it was not a great year to open a restaurant. It was 2008, and it was directly before the economy tanked, and Phillies were in the playoffs, and we were about to elect Obama, and it was not good. So, yeah, we had a really, really hard year, and the way that I'd sort of dealt with my brother's death was not a healthy way, to say the least, and everything came to a head basically then. So I went to rehab and detox, and my partner Steve and my wife Mary had to sort of confront me and sort of kidnap me a little bit, and I'm not kidnap me, but yeah, it was an incredibly difficult year. It was really hard for everybody, and it was hard for basically every employee at Zahav, and it was incredibly difficult to then, have to, maintain sobriety and be blatantly honest, and also to run this like Israeli restaurant in Philadelphia while like the economy is falling apart. So we made a lot of changes. I wouldn't be the restaurant wouldn't be a success without Steve and without Mary, my wife.
I remember eating there early on in that first year, and it was very complicated. We got the tasting menu, and there was like 4 different things. One of the people at the table said it's like an SAT test. There's like too many things here.
It was an SAT test in a biblical language, actually.
And they explained everything.
Yeah, they explained everything. The problem was that most of you don't speak Hebrew fluently, and because we're representing 20 different languages, like the dialects were all different, and we didn't also put any menu descriptions underneath anything. So you'd come in and you'd be like, "Oh, malawach, what's that?" And they'd be like, the server would be like, "I actually don't know. I just started here. Let me go get the chef. He's incoherent. Let me get somebody else." So there were a lot of problems with the opening, and then basically it took us almost failing. You make decisions really, really quickly when you aren't getting paid. You make decisions very differently when you're not connecting with your customer, and that was the biggest thing. Nobody understood what it was that we were doing, and we needed to almost fail, I think, in order to change it.
I think you also wrote that doing a menu for Restaurant Week, where you had to really simplify it, made a big difference. But did sober living also clarify sort of what you were doing in the kitchen? Did that help?
I don't know if it helped. It really depends. The first year of sobriety, it's not a great year to do anything. But we, it definitely helped. Rather than being an active addiction, I guess it definitely helped. But it was a very sobering year, I think, for everybody. I mean, it was like there was a lot of uncertainty. We were I called my dad to borrow money to make payroll. I mean, it was like very, very bad. And, we had to eliminate all the staff. And we've had the quarter, which was like very fine dining, which we only sat one night a week that nobody came to. They took all my energy. And then we had the regular restaurant, which was like sort of Israeli food to the T, but also it doesn't make any sense cooking Israeli food in eastern Pennsylvania the way that you would do it in Israel. Like tomatoes, for example, in like February. When it's 7 degrees out, eating an Israeli salad doesn't make a lot of sense. So you have to, we had to sort of get liberated. And I remember a conversation with Steve saying, "Dude, just cook food. Don't copy what it is that you think is Israeli. You're a chef, just make food." And we started doing that, and we got really, really honest about what our mission was, the way that we wanted our customers and diners what we wanted them to experience, how we wanted them to leave, how they were so special. I mean, we talk about this all the time in the restaurant now. Every single guest is like, they have so many choices. At the time, it was like, they're special because if they don't come in and pay, we're going to go under. Like, we're all going to die, okay? So, like, you treat people very differently that way, and I think that level of attention and hospitality and the love and the generosity that we show and we try to we want people to experience now is sort of a result of that, and that shapes our whole restaurant group.
So can you talk about just exactly that? So how did you refine your original ideas to make food that people really connected with? You sort of threw out the idea of it has to be authentic. And how did you refine, how did you come to the dishes that, like, this is something people are going to want to eat?
I think that you have to sort of channel, I had to channel everything that I had sort of learned up until then. And, like, we still have, I can make Moroccan salad the way that, like, your mother made it, but, like, you're going to come in and say that my salad sucks. And if you're Israeli, you're going to walk over to the palace where I work. You're going to point your finger in my face and say, "This isn't the way that my mom used to make it again," And so there's no point. The Moroccan salad that I want to make has carrots that are grown from Lancaster, and we have to get Aleppo pepper from this person, and like maybe we don't have Aleppo peppers, so one of our farmers dries their own cayenne, so let's make Moroccan salad that way. We use halloumi cheese now, which is a Cypriot. I shouldn't say halloumi cheese. It's actually halloumi cheese is only from Cyprus, and if you argue that, the Cypriotic police come into the restaurant and break your legs. So we have a halloumi-style cheese that we get from New Jersey right now that we've never had before. Like, nobody is ever doing that, and I think that makes our Israeli food better. I don't need to order 300 pounds of cheese that has to get cryovac, frozen, shipped on a cargo, sitting in storage somewhere to come in to say, like, I really, that to me is not stimulating.
But
And
I know that cheese was made to very exacting standards because I overheard on the phone Craig talking to you, talking to the guy at Valley Shepherd. Is it good enough yet? Is it good enough yet?
Right, and then also for Constantino at Canella to be like, all that cheese sucks. Just get the Cypriot cheese. But so the point is like we're chefs and we're restaurant people, and like our take on Israeli food is more interesting. Not to mention we're not in Israel, and we get to look at the Bulgarian, the Romanian, the Moroccan, the Yemeni, all this. We get to see it from third person. We get our narrative, our perspective is different than that of an Israeli chef in Israel. We get to take it all.
So sort of along those same lines, can you talk about your approach to kosher at Zahav and at your other restaurants?
You had to ask that.
Sorry.
I respectfully decline from answering that question. At Zahav, what we do is kosher style. We don't mix milk and meat together on any plate, and we don't serve pork or shellfish. And we're open on Fridays and Saturdays.
And the same is true in the cookbook.
The same is true. Yeah, there's like 2 exceptions in the cookbook, but they're noted, so not to worry. You won't get confused into eating non-kosher.
Tahini, however you want to pronounce it, can you talk about the versatility and the importance of that in Israeli cooking?
Well, so actually as it relates to kashrut, the reason that we didn't want to do milk and meat was like the most vivid sort of thing. I never wanted to roast lamb leg and serve it with yogurt, even though lamb and yogurt are fantastic together. It's not something to me that screams Israel. It screams Turkey or Greece. And if you're going to try to identify and define Israeli food, you have to accept that tahina is like what makes it work. Like Israelis love it. They love to eat it with everything, sweet, savory. It's the sauce that sort of goes on everything. And if you are in like my house, you eat it with a spoon on the couch, watching TV, typically. But I think that a lot of people don't necessarily know about the importance of it. I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's what makes Israeli hummus different than some of the other types of hummus in the Middle East. It's the use of tahina. It's more of like a sort of nutty, rich, rather than like lemon and garlic.
And how crazy is it that Soom is here in Philadelphia?
It's right. Soom is the...
Are these the Soom people? Shout out to them.
Yeah. The Soom people are going to battle the Pittsburgh people at the end of this. Well, we're really, really lucky. Some would even call it Beshert, like it was meant to be. But so Soom, okay, so tahina up until I think very recently, most people thought it was like the sesame paste that I grew up with which was sometimes homogenized, sometimes broken, usually found in a dusty aisle in a random supermarket. And even though it sucked, you still ate it because you had to have tahina at the table. But we are lucky because the Soom sisters are based out of Philly. They buy sesame seeds from Ethiopia. They are sent to Nazareth in Israel and processed to make the best tahina you've ever had in your life. They also, they paid me, and then I pay you, and it's distributed here as well. So yeah, we go through, I don't know, swimming pools of tahina here, and you guys all have access to it as well.
So let's talk about the progression of your restaurants after Zahav. You had Federal Donuts, Dizengoff, Abe Fisher. I really thought that Federal Donuts was the one they were going to try and take nationwide because it seemed like it was reproducible and would be, pretty easy to make money. But then I went to Dizengoff and I was like, no, this is it. This is the one there.
Why not both? I don't know. We're lucky. I mean, Steve and I. Do you guys know my partner, Steve Cook?
That was my next question.
Steve, are you here? There he is. Hi. Can you guys say hi to Steve? Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
So we sort of fell into Federal Donuts. It wasn't like we didn't. After the aha Israeli cuisine moment that I had in the bakery like a million years ago, we weren't like, oh, let's open a fried chicken donut coffee shop. Let's do the most random thing in the world. It was sort of based on the partners that we had, that we met. Tom Henneman and Bobby Logue, who opened Bodhi Coffee Shop and brought Stumptown. Felicia D'Ambrosia, who's like the mayor of Philadelphia. We all sort of got together, said that we wanted to open a coffee shop and maybe serve donuts. I think at that time we were going to Soho Cafe in Elkins Park and eating like Korean fried chicken wings twice a week, which I can't do anymore. Literally burns my esophagus, but so good. And so we were like, let's do donuts and we'll do fried chicken and we can just buy one fryer and that's all we'll need. Which it doesn't work, that you can't do that. You need two separate fryers. So we did that and we did the coffee and like day one we ran out of donuts, at 9 o'clock in the morning and we didn't even have enough chicken to sell to the line of people. We had to cut the chicken into pieces and give it out, and I had to tell dirty jokes, which we still do on Sundays. Just kidding. And then I sort of, after that day, we were like, oh, maybe this was a great idea. Maybe we should just do these. And then since then, we've opened, the hummusia, Dizengoff is like a thing. That exists, that exists in many different countries. It definitely exists in Israel. It's where every single person eats. The cab drivers eat in the morning, the soldiers eat midday, the lawyers and doctors eat later on, and everybody, you make a couple pots of chickpeas, you make hummus throughout the day, and then when you run out, you close, which is hard to do in this country. But we thought that we would do it, and it's been great. I mean, it's awesome. I think both Federal Donuts and Dizengoff, there's a fast casual thing that's happening now in the States where you don't have to eat crap and still have it be affordable and be able to eat it like multiple times a week, and we're proud of that. Both Federal Donuts and Dizengoff, I think, are fantastic restaurants that are scale. So yeah, I think if we were to
Are we going to see them all over the country soon?
It really depends. I think that I guess we will.
Or should I ask your partner, Steve?
Yeah,
are we
don't
gonna
ask
see
me.
Them?
I think he nodded. We're going to do it.
So it seems like you found the perfect partner in Stephen Cook. Can
Yes.
you talk about your partnership and how you two complement each other with different strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, totally. I thought I would be able to do this a lot easier. I feel like I'm going to start crying. So. Steve and I met. Okay, so Steve's wife Shira was my mom's student in Solomon Schechter School, and when I was working at Vetri, at that time, the sous chefs worked for 2 years, and then Mark kicked you out and sent you to Italy, or you went to New York or whatever. It's sort of like a learning kitchen. So at one point I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Do I go to Spain? Do I go to New York? Do I go to Italy? And so Shira ends up calling me while Steve was calling Mark separately, because Steve had staged at Vetri when he first moved to Philly, and he was asking if Mark knew somebody that wanted to be a chef. Shira called me, we had coffee, and it worked out great. And 10 years later, we're best friends and brothers, and we've done absolutely everything together. And Steve and my wife Mary physically saved my life, and I don't know, we spend 10 hours a day together talking about God knows what. nothing. We talk about nothing for 10 hours a day. But, you know, in the time that we've worked together, we've opened all these different restaurants. We've achieved all these things we never thought we would. We found our, families gotten married, have kids, dealt with death, dealt with addiction, dealt with 200 employees, and then, Steve wrote the book. So we got a good thing going.
So it's Steve's writing that I'm complimenting in the book.
Yeah, I did a lot of talking.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So you also wrote about how Mark Vetri was critical to your success.
without a doubt.
And can you talk about the bond that forms between chefs, even, going back to that time in your bakery, that camaraderie, that pride and hard work?
Well, I mean, it's absolutely. I think that happens in a lot of places. I feel like I've been really sort of blessed to work for and with like incredible people. I mean, I got lucky. So when I worked at Vetri, I was there for a year. Well, I was staging. I staged for one day. You know what? This is crazy. Before I even moved to Philly, I had like the Philly mag, like best of. Sorry, can I say Philly mag around here or no?
Yeah, no,
Okay, all right.
fine.
So I had the Philly mag, and it was like about top 50 restaurants, and there were like 2 restaurants that I wanted to work at. One was Straight Bass, one was Vetri, and I still remember it. It was like, this 30-seat restaurant that serves almond tortellini, wild boar, chocolate fettuccine, and I was coming from like Florida, which is like, mango shrimp and beurre blanc when it's like 95 degrees out. So I really wanted to work at Vetri. I called the restaurant. I guess I spoke to Mark since he has like no employees at that time. And it was like, we don't really hire people. And then I showed up one day when I first moved here after deciding that I wanted to live in Philly, and I go into the back and Mark is there. And he's like, we don't, if you want to come hang out, you can, but we don't really like hire people. And I was like, who's this dude? He's wearing like a wife beater and like, Carhartts. And I didn't realize it was Mark. I thought it was like the trash guy or something. I don't know what it was, or like a delivery guy. And then a year after I started working at Straight Bass, one of my buddies was like, hey, I got this stage at Vetri. I can't go this week. Do you want to go? And I was like, yeah, of course. I wanted to work there since I moved to Philly. And I go in, I work one day, and as luck would have it, because there was no turnover there, like the guy quit that was going to work. So I had this like little opportunity to work there, and it was amazing. And I worked the pastry. And I had been working at Striped Bass where we would do like 350 covers a night, and I was like lead line cook, speaking in French, totally killing it. And then we get to Vetri, and it's like you have to make 25 chocolate souffles, and I sucked. I broke the ice cream machine on day 2, and everything. I like broke everything in that kitchen in the first week, and there's something about working in such a small kitchen. You develop these bonds that are totally different. So I'm there for almost a year. At that time, Vetri closed for like almost 3 weeks in the month of August, which is like a super Italian thing to do, which I'm sure he doesn't do anymore. But I was there at the time where we got to do that, and I got to go back to Israel, and I hadn't been there since the bakery days. So I got to go back at the same time that the month before my brother's army release. So we literally he had a little vacation before his release, so we were together for 3 weeks. And I came back, and, a few weeks later he was killed. And, Mark was one of the first people to come over. He and Sal, his father, were one of the first people to come over to the house, And then a few months later, I was like, I want to go cook for my brother's army unit on the Lebanese border. They're still at the same base. And Mark's like, I'm coming with you,
Wow.
He did say, this is hilarious, he was like, we should do a whole roasted suckling pig. And I was like, I don't know.
That might not go over.
No. But, you're surrounded by people that you love, that inspire you, that you learn from. And I mean, it's all good. It's all success. So I'm lucky to have all these people in my life, That's it. It's luck, pretty much.
Well, I'm sure you give as good as you get,
Yeah.
because it's not a one-way street. Just going back to Israel for a minute, there's a line in your book, Israelis are always prepared for 2 things, war and barbecue. Can you explain that for us?
I don't know. Do I have to explain that?
Yes.
How about another question? What my diet is like at home? Well, I mean, it's a volatile country. So I think that we were just talking about innovation, and we were talking about Israeli high tech, and I was like, there's something about this country that is like, almost everybody suffers a little bit from post-traumatic stress, and your ability to take risks and also enjoy life when it comes, and there's something beautiful about the Sabbath in Israel, and not from a religious standpoint, but just culturally. It's like Friday nights, everybody comes together, every slice of sort of generation is in the same place eating, and and such an emphasis on food. I mean, that's how people identify where they come from, right? So you've got all these different cooking traditions that have come from basically all over, not just the Middle East, not just North Africa, but all over the world. And the ceremony is eating on Friday nights, whether you're religious or not. So barbecue thing, definitely, but I think just eating in general, I think it's like, people are just proud of their heritage and sort of all about it. And when you eat, like my dad's house on Saturday afternoon, so he's Bulgarian, so we've got Bulgarian kebabs, we've got borekas, we've got, pepper salad, and his girlfriend's Romanian, so there's Romanian food, and my brother-in-law is Persian, so there's Iranian food everywhere, and they live right next to an Arab town called Tira, so they bring the shawarma, and it's like that's what it's all about over there, in my opinion. And I think that you could go into anybody's home, or well, you shouldn't just like walk into somebody's home, but you should wait till you get invited. But getting invited isn't a very hard thing to do over there. So I think that things can be very hostile over there, but very, very quickly they can be celebratory and festive.
Celebrate the good things.
Exactly.
I think that's all the time we have, so we're going to take questions from the audience.
I would just like to pay you a compliment. I've been to Zahav many times, and apparently my name must have shown up in the computer as a frequent customer, but the last time I was there with 4 or 5 other people, and the waitstaff kept bringing out free this and free that. We might have had 5 different things that were free, and we were really flattered by that, and I just wanted to thank you for it.
Well, thank you, and I glad that you enjoyed it. And
All the time.
You should all expect the same treatment when you come to the restaurant.
What is Israeli barbecue? Those of us who haven't seen the book.
Well, I think you should buy the book. No, Israeli. Okay, so Israeli barbecue. It's like shishlik and kebab. It's basically cooking either marinated chunks of meat or ground meat mixtures, like generally over sticks, generally right over the charcoal, without a grill grate. Usually with a lot of men like flipping cardboard to keep it stoked.
I just want to commend you because so many people thought Jewish food was bagels, lox, and whitefish until like 8 years ago, so including many Jewish people who've been to Israel. And I've always had a love for Sephardic culture, so I just loved Zahav from the beginning. And I love Abe Fisher too, by the way, which is more Ashkenazic, but it also, there's overlap. But I just wanted to ask, like, I know how soft-spoken and reserved Israelis are about giving their opinion, sarcasm font. How do they respond? Like, have some of them commended you for putting out Sephardic and international food out there? Or some of them come, like you said, and like waved their hand and said, like, my Yemenite grandmother would think this is crap.
Yeah.
Or and also if non-Jewish, like Middle Eastern people come, and has been like a bridge for cultural understanding?
Without a doubt, we get absolutely every type of customer, and we get Israelis that are less complimentary than others. We call that keeping it real. And we get people that are very complimentary. I think a lot of people. So the biggest form of flattery for me is like an Israeli that comes in that says, I've all these flavors I've grown up with, I've never had it quite like this. And that's cool, and there's people that have never been to Israel that could care less, that come in and say, this is great hummus, and I love it, and that's also very good. So I think that we're pretty adamant about, we try to accept as much criticism as we can and really reflect upon it, and whether that's from people that no Israeli food or not. And our thinking is that it makes us a better restaurant.
Could you talk a little bit about the chicken soup project that you guys have?
Rooster soup. So okay, yeah, I can do that. Steve usually does this, but I've been drinking coffee all day long, so I think I got it. All right. So Rooster Soup is it is a restaurant with 100% of the profits going to help people in need. We had this situation where we were getting, we were getting so much chicken for Federal Donuts that it was like almost impossible to get whole chickens, right? Because you get a whole chicken, you've got these carcasses, and where we come from, you make great chicken soup, right? But on a giant scale, it's very difficult to allocate all the parts. Even if we served only chicken soup at Zahav, like that's it, like we still would have an excess of chicken backs, you know? So we decided, Steve was asked or roped into being on the hospitality board at Broad Street Ministries, and we were figuring out a way to participate and to help, and we had this sort of idea that we could take the chicken backs and make soup. And then I was like, well, just make chicken soup and we'll just feed people chicken soup all day long. When in fact that really doesn't, serving soup on the side of the road is not going to get, it's not going to better people's lives. It's not going to make people be able to integrate and feel proud of eating, right? So when you eat, when you serve at Broad Street, and we go once a quarter, our company goes and volunteers, people come in, sit down, and they are served. And it's not only a place to eat, it's got psychiatric counseling, it's a mailbox for thousands of people that don't, have a way to get information, like benefits or like any sort of mail. So we thought that we would open this restaurant that is called Rooster Soup, that we'd utilize all the chicken parts that we couldn't use for Federal Donuts, which actually also allows us to get better quality chickens because we can order them whole, and with 100% of the profit going towards Broad Street Ministries.
Thank you. 2 questions, please. One, will you be selling your hummus retail?
Retail hummus? I don't know.
No?
I don't know about that.
All right.
We'll see.
And the other question is, what determined you to locate Zahav in its present location?
Why? We were contemplating a couple different locations. I think that the things sort of aligned properly. We lucked out because Zahav used to be an Italian restaurant, and the wood-burning oven that we use was actually built as a pizza oven from a guy from Naples. So there were a lot of things going for it. We loved the space. We thought there was something really sort of magical about it. It's up on a hill. It's got sort of landscaping around it. It's impossible to find on Google Maps. And nobody knows. That's like the Zahav thing. It's like people walking around like zombies with their phone, and they're just like running into walls and trees around the restaurant. I don't know if it's actually a great location for a restaurant, but we found the space, and the deal sort of worked, and we were our thinking was that when there were like snowstorms, everybody from Society Hill Towers would come down and eat, which they don't, but everybody else comes during snowstorms. Yeah, so it was just sort of a time and place.
A comment and then a question. The comment is, I want everyone to know what kind of stock you come from, because few men I've known commanded the respect and love your grandfather did from the community, and I want to be able to say that, number one.
Thank you.
Doc Fisher was just a phenomenal man. The other question is, every time Maureen and I go home to Pittsburgh, the question is, so when are Steve and Michael coming to Pittsburgh? So
We're working on it. What's ironic is Steve ends up in Pittsburgh a lot more than I do, but
well, we need the restaurant,
I know. Actually, you don't care about us. You just want Zahav to come to Pittsburgh. I know. We love Pittsburgh, and there hopefully will be something soon at Pittsburgh. Not as Zahav, though. Zahav is Philly. Zahav stays here.
2-part question. Number one, if we could get the name of the gentleman who gets all the freebies that we could use when next time we make a reservation.
We have all of his information. We'll just send you his
It would be
cell
great
phone
to
and
use that name.
social security number. We got you.
2, you talked about Chef Constantine, it's as if there's a culture among the chefs that you're a little, we customers were a little afraid of him at Canella. But is there where do you guys hang out? When do you all get together? Is there a time and place where all the chefs hang out?
I mean,
how do you get to know each other? And
it's hard. I mean, chefs work all the time, so everyone's like, "Oh, we're having the chef after party." I'm like, I just want to go home and watch TV quietly or eat cereal, in my bathrobe. Chefs hang out because we're actually a lot of the charity events we sort of participate in, and we go out to each other's restaurants and we lean on each other. I mean, this is a very tight-knit community, and it wouldn't be strange for me to call a chef for a reference or to complain about a cook that we've shared, or ask to borrow like celery or any of that. Philly's a pretty tight city, so we do a lot of that, a lot of hanging out. I think people go out to bars. I don't, but we definitely do a lot of coffee drinking, and we always run into each other at Pho 75, the Vietnamese restaurant.
I was just sitting here listening to you through this whole evening, and you have such a direct contact with the audience. Did you ever think about writing a screen script for what you've been through up to the present?
No, but if you'd like to after the event.
Or maybe that's Steve's next job.
I know.
He's the writer in the...
Well, I haven't thought about it, but Steve's working on a screenplay. I don't know. It's funny too. I don't think restaurant life has been depicted properly yet in TV and movies. So, sure, yeah, that would be cool.
What about Chef?
I haven't seen Chef, but I would love to. I don't know. It's a food truck thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a little schmaltzy.
Schmaltzy?
Yeah, it's a little schmaltzy.
Oh, no pun intended.
Hi, just want to say first, I'm such a huge fan. I've been to all your restaurants. They're amazing. And anytime out-of-towners come into Philly, I tell them, have to go to Zahav, Federal Donuts, and
Thank you.
the whole list. So I've noticed, in recent years, this huge increase in popularity of Israeli and Middle Eastern cuisine, and especially a lot of books like Ottolenghi and others. Do you think that Israeli cuisine is going to get really popular more globally, or is it still kind of a niche thing?
Well, I think that everybody's always looking for the next thing. So, I think Israeli food is here to stay. I really do. Like I said, there's so many different cultures represented in sort of such a small place. I think it's here for the long haul.
Thank you. So in reading about the culinary tour you led of Israel earlier this year, there was a section where it said that you were visiting 1,000-year-old cheese caves to try the cheese aged there.
Yes.
What is that cheese, and do you have any other favorites you would recommend other than Valley Shepherd halloumi?
I stand behind all of Valley Shepherd cheese.
They're here too.
As far as cheese in general or cheese in Israel?
Either. Broad question.
I know cheese domestically or cheese that you can access here. I would say just go to De Bruno Brothers or and eat anything, or I would go to Valley Shepherd and eat anything. Definitely. I think that Valley Shepherd, it's from New Jersey and it's just the most incredible cheese and so varied. So I would say that's a good way to go. When I'm in Israel, I go to a guy named Shai Zeltzer, who's got the cheese cave that dates back to the Second Temple period, and he has got a cave that has been there forever that he ages these 7-year pecorinos, and he makes labneh, which is an Arabic yogurt that it tastes like vanilla mousse. It's incredibly good. There's also a spa in the north called Mitzpeh Hayamim, which is an organic. They've got an organic farm, and they make about 35 different varieties of cheese there, ranging from soft to hard. So I would definitely check out Mitzpeh Hayamim, and I would check out Shai Zeltzer, and then there is, I'm going to remember. Just email the restaurant. If you're going to be in Israel, just email the restaurant. We'll hook you up, all right?
I have a question. So a couple of your restaurants for Passover, Rosh Hashanah, you always have, meal. I always get the emails and stuff. What was your idea behind that, having that at the restaurant? Because usually most people have Passover Seder, at their home. So like, why would they ever come to a restaurant type of thing? So what was your thinking behind that?
Well, I think that a lot of our association with this food is sometimes based around holidays. And I think that the holidays in Israel are, a lot of it is sort of identified with the food that you eat, right? And for us, a lot of the stuff that's super nostalgic is the stuff that you eat on the holidays as well. So for it's fun, it's stimulating, and I think that for a lot of people that like don't necessarily want to go to shul, they come to Zahav and they're like, oh, this is check off the list.
It's a religious experience.
But I think like for Pesach, we get to make our own matzah in like a wood burning oven, and it's, not a lot of people get to do that, and matzah can be delicious. Maybe not for like after day 5 of eating unleavened bread, but fresh matzah is awesome, and great matzah ball soup is super cool. And in cooking a variation on the brisket that like my mom served to me, that Steve's mom cooked every single Friday, that her parents cooked, like I want to be part of that, and I want you all to eat it and to try it. And it backfires a lot because people do want like the chopped liver that they grew up with that we can't reproduce, or God knows why. But but like for Hanukkah this year, we're gonna braise lamb shanks with quince, which is like an old school Bulgarian thing, and we're gonna make our own sufganiot. And this year Abe Fisher did like a traditional Rosh Hashanah, and even for Christmas Eve, like the day before Christmas Eve, we serve Chinese food.
That is great.
Yeah.
And on that note,
yeah.
Thank you very much.